The painting was unremarkable to most eyes. A simple watercolor of a lighthouse at dawn, the kind of coastal scene that filled 1,000 New England galleries. But Vivienne Drake had stopped breathing the moment she saw it. Her fingers tightened around the champagne flute. The auction catalog trembled slightly in her other hand, though she forced herself still. Around her, the charity gala hummed with the particular frequency of old money and new ambition. Martha's Vineyard in late September carried both the warmth of summer's ghost and the sharp clarity of autumn's arrival. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Harborview estate, the Atlantic stretched dark and infinite beneath a sky going purple at the edges. Vivienne had not come here for the auction. She had come because Ellis Tran would be here, and Ellis Tran held the key to Meridian Tech, and Meridian Tech was the only thing that mattered. The painting was a complication she had not anticipated. She moved closer to the display, her heels silent on the antique Persian rugs. The lighthouse keeper's cottage sat small and white against the rocks. Morning light touched everything with gold. In the corner, nearly invisible unless you knew to look, were initials. M.D. Margaret Drake, her mother. Vivienne had thought all of her mother's work lost, gathered to estate sales and forgotten collections after the bankruptcy, after the divorce, after everything that came after a woman trusted the wrong man with both her heart and her business. This painting should not exist. And yet here it was, lot 47, estimated value $12,000 to $15,000. A rounding error in Vivienne's world now. A lifetime ago, it would have been everything. Beautiful piece. The voice came from behind her, low and warm like bourbon over ice. Vivienne did not turn immediately. She had spent 15 years learning to control every micro-expression, every tell. The mask came easier than breathing now. When she did turn, she found herself looking at a man who seemed designed to throw her off balance. Tall with the kind of casual elegance that came from tailored suits worn so often they moved like second skin. Dark hair going silver at the temples. Eyes that held both humor and something else, something careful and guarded that she recognized because she saw it in her mirror every morning. Nathaniel Carver. Of course, Master Carver. Her voice was cool, professional, with just enough warmth to avoid rudeness. I didn't realize you collected art. I don't usually. He moved to stand beside her, his attention on the painting rather than her face. The small courtesy of it surprised her. But I make exceptions for work that matters. This one feels personal somehow, like the artist was painting memory rather than landscape. Vivienne's throat tightened. She took a careful sip of champagne to hide it. Margaret Drake was exceptionally talented, she said, keeping her tone academic. Most of her work was lost when her studio closed in the 90s. This is probably one of the last pieces in private hands. Drake. Nate's eyes cut to her briefly. Any relation? None that matters. The lie came smooth and practiced. She had shed her mother's name a decade ago, taken her grandmother's maiden name instead. Vivienne Cortland had died the day she lost everything. Vivienne Drake had risen from those ashes with armor welded tight. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth, there and gone. I see. The moment stretched. Around them, the gala continued its elaborate dance. Old acquaintances air-kissing, new rivals circling, money flowing like the champagne that kept appearing on silver trays. But in this small pocket of space standing before her mother's lighthouse, Vivienne felt the world narrow to just the two of them, and the painting between them. I plan to bid on it, she said, because sometimes the best strategy was directness. So do I. His tone matched hers, pleasant and immovable as stone. Mr. Carver. Nate, please. We're about to become either adversaries or allies, depending on how the evening goes. Might as well start with first names. She studied him more carefully then. Nathaniel Carver, 41, founder and CEO of Carver Capital, one of the most successful private equity firms in the country, with a reputation for calculated risks that somehow always paid off. Clean record, cleaner image. Widower. No scandals, no missteps, nothing but steady growth and quiet philanthropy. She distrusted him immediately. She repeated, "That's an interesting word for two people who want the same thing." Is it the same thing? He tilted his head slightly, studying the painting. I'm curious why Drake Industries' CEO would fly to Martha's Vineyard for a charity auction, unless there's something here besides art. Of course he knew. She had not expected to stay anonymous forever, but she had hoped for more time, more information, more leverage before this particular collision. Ellis Tran is a friend, she said carefully. Ellis Tran is dying. Nate's voice gentled with the words losing its edge. And before he goes, he wants to ensure Meridian Tech lands in the right hands. I'm guessing you're here for the same reason I am, to convince him those hands should be ours. The directness of it caught her off guard. In her world, people circled and fainted, never stating the truth so baldly. She found herself reassessing him again, looking past the surface polish to something more genuine underneath. And which of us do you think has the right hands? She asked. I don't know yet. He turned to face her fully, and the humor had left his expression entirely. But I suspect Ellis is about to make us both prove it. Before she could respond, a small commotion rippled through the crowd near the entrance. Voices lifted, heads turned. Vivienne followed the wave of attention and found Ellis Tran himself being wheeled into the gallery by a young woman in a simple blue dress. He looked worse than the last time she had seen him. Thinner, more fragile, his skin paper pale against the dark fabric of his chair. But his eyes remained sharp, taking in the room with the same analytical intensity that had built Meridian Tech from a garage startup into an AI company that could reshape entire industries. His gaze found her and Nate standing by the painting. Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. Then he was smiling, raising one hand in a small gesture that somehow commanded the entire room's attention. Thank you all for coming. Ellis said, his voice smaller than it had once been, but still clear. For those who don't know me, I'm Ellis Tran. This is my daughter Sophie, who has graciously agreed to be my arms and legs, while mine have decided to take early retirement. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Sophie, the woman pushing his chair, smiled but said nothing. Vivienne noted the protective way her hand rested on her father's shoulder, the careful attention in her eyes. Not daughter by blood then, perhaps, but daughter in all the ways that mattered. I won't keep you from the excellent wine and questionable shrimp puffs, Ellis continued, but I wanted to thank you personally for supporting the Coastal Conservation Fund. These waters, this land, they matter. They'll matter long after we're all gone. Speaking of which, he paused, the weight of what came next hanging in the air. I have an announcement. Meridian Tech will be sold within the month. I've received several very generous offers, and I'm currently deciding between candidates. Whoever purchases the company will not just be acquiring technology. They'll be accepting a legacy, a responsibility to use what we've built for good, not just profit. The room had gone still. Vivienne felt every muscle in her body locked tight, her mind already racing through implications, adjustments to her strategy. Beside her, Nate had gone equally motionless. But tonight isn't about business, Ellis said lighter now. Tonight is about art and ocean and the things that matter when the numbers stop counting. So please enjoy yourselves. Bid recklessly. The dolphins, thank you. He wheeled away, then Sophie guiding him toward a quiet corner where a small cluster of older donors waited. But not before his eyes found Vivienne and Nate one more time, holding there for just a moment too long. Well, Nate said quietly, I guess we both know what we're really here for now. We always did, Vivienne replied. The auction began an hour later after dinner had been served and cleared, after the light had died completely outside the windows, leaving only their reflections ghost-like against the dark glass. Vivienne positioned herself near the back of the room where she could watch without being watched too closely. Nate stood 3 rows ahead of her, hands in his pockets, perfectly at ease. The first lots moved quickly. A photograph by a local artist, a sculpture of a whale's tail, a weekend at a beach house in Nantucket. Prices climbed higher than the actual value because that was the point. This was charity dressed as auction, and everyone here knew the game. Then Lot 47 appeared on the screen. Her mother's lighthouse. We'll start the bidding at $10,000, the auctioneer announced. Vivienne's paddle went up immediately. $12,000. Nate's voice calm and conversational. Her paddle again. 15. A pause. She could feel eyes turning toward them now, curiosity sharpening into something more interested. People were starting to notice the pattern. 20,000, Nate said. She did not hesitate. 25. Another pause, longer this time. In her peripheral vision, she saw him turn his head slightly, not quite looking at her, but acknowledging her presence. The set of his shoulders had changed, tension creeping into the careful ease. 30,000, he said, and there was something in his voice now. Not anger, not quite, but a note that said he understood this mattered and he was not backing down. Vivienne's hand lifted. 40,000. A murmur went through the room. The estimated value had been 15 at most. They were well past reasonable, now well into the territory of something else, something personal. Nate was fully turned toward her now, and their eyes met across the space between them. She could not read his expression. Could not tell if he knew what this painting meant, or if he simply refused to lose. 50,000, he said, still holding her gaze. She should stop, she knew that. This was excessive drawing attention, potentially tipping her hand about things she preferred to keep close. But the lighthouse keeper's cottage glowed on the screen, her mother's brushstrokes visible even in the digital reproduction, and Vivienne could not make herself care about strategy. 75,000. The room went very quiet. Nate did not move for a long moment. Then so slowly it felt deliberate, he lowered his head in something that might have been acknowledgement or might have been surrender. Going once, the auctioneer said, surprise clear in his voice. Going twice. Sold to Paddle 217 for $75,000. Applause broke out, enthusiastic and genuine. Vivienne lowered her hands, suddenly aware of how hard her heart was beating, how her palms had gone damp inside her careful composure. She had won, but it felt less like victory and more like she had revealed something she had meant to keep hidden. She did not stay for the rest of the auction. Let them talk. Let them wonder. She made her way to the payment desk, arranged for the painting's careful transport to her Manhattan apartment, accepted the congratulations of strangers with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. The night air hit her like a blessing when she finally escaped to the terrace. The party continued inside, but out here there was only the sound of the ocean and the wind moving through the late roses. She found a stone wall at the garden's edge and sat, not caring about her dress, not caring about anything except the sudden, overwhelming weight of memory. Her mother had painted that lighthouse the summer before everything fell apart. Vivienne had been there 23 and freshly graduated from business school home for what she thought would be a brief visit before she conquered the world. She remembered her mother at the easel, the smell of watercolor and ocean salt, the way the light hit the cottage at dawn. She remembered thinking her mother wasted her talent on small paintings, that she should be more ambitious, more aggressive, more like the daughter who was going to build empires. How arrogant she had been, how stupidly, blindly sure that ambition was the only thing that mattered. I'm sorry, Vivienne whispered to the darkness, to the ghost of her mother, to the girl she used to be. I'm sorry I didn't understand. Talking to yourself, or can anyone join the conversation? She turned sharply. Nate stood a few feet away, 2 glasses of something amber in his hands. He offered one to her, not presuming to come closer without invitation. I thought you'd be inside celebrating your victory, he said when she did not immediately tell him to leave. It's a painting, not a hostile takeover. Was it? He moved to lean against the wall beside her, careful to maintain distance. Because from where I stood, it looked like a battle. Vivienne said nothing. She took the glass he offered because refusing would be giving him information about how rattled she actually was. Margaret Drake was your mother, he said after a moment. Not a question. How did you, the way you looked at it, like you were seeing a ghost? He paused. And because I make it my business to know who I'm competing with. Vivienne Cortland, born Vivienne Drake. Changed your name 12 years ago, around the same time you started Drake Industries. Your mother died 3 years before that. Died was a kind word for it. Her mother had simply stopped it one day. Stopped at painting, stopped fighting, stopped getting out of bed. The official cause of death was heart failure, but Vivienne knew the truth. Her mother had died of a broken heart and broken dreams, killed by the man who took everything and left nothing but debt and shame. I'm sorry, Nate said, and he sounded like he meant it. I lost someone too. I know what it's like to see reminders everywhere. She looked at him, then really looked. Past the polish and the power to the grief underneath. It sat in the careful way he held himself in the shadows at the corners of his eyes. He wore it better than she did, or maybe just differently, but it was there. Your wife, she said, remembering the details from her research. And your daughter. Plane crash, 5 years ago. His voice went flat automatic the way hers did when she talked about her mother. They were coming to meet me for a conference in Sao Paulo. I convinced them to take an earlier flight because I wanted extra time. If I had just let them take the original flight, he stopped, took a breath, drank from his glass. Anyway, he said, I know about ghosts. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the ocean. The party continued behind them, but it felt very far away. This strange pocket of quiet, two strangers who were not quite strangers, comparing scars. Why did you bid on the painting? Vivienne asked finally, if you knew it was personal to me. Because I didn't know until saw your either face, and by then I was too far in to back out gracefully. He glanced at her, and because I'm trying to prove to Ellis Tran that I'm the right person to carry on his legacy, which means I don't back down easily even when I probably should. That's honest. I'm too tired for anything else. He set his glass down on the wall, turned to face her more fully. Look, I don't know what your play is here, but I'm guessing we're both trying to convince the same dying man that we deserve his life's work. That makes us competitors whether we like it or not. I don't like it, Vivienne said, but you're right. So here's what I'm thinking. We could spend the next few weeks circling each other, trying to sabotage each other's chances, making everything more difficult than it needs to be, or we could be honest about what we want and let Ellis make his choice based on who we actually are rather than who we're pretending to be. He studied her face. I'm betting that's what he actually wants anyway. He's too smart for games. Vivienne wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that honesty was a luxury neither of them could afford, that vulnerability was weakness, that trusting someone in business was the fastest way to lose everything. But she was tired too, tired of the armor, tired of the calculations. And something about this man, this stranger who understood ghosts, made her want to believe that maybe there was another way. All right, she said, honesty. What do you want from Meridian? He considered the question seriously, looking out at the dark ocean. I want to build something that lasts, something that matters past the next quarter's returns. My wife used to say I was good at making money, but not at understanding what it was for. She was right. Meridian could change that. It's AI with actual purpose, actual humanity. That's rare. And you think Ellis will sell it to you because you want to do good? No, I think he'll sell it to whoever convinces him they won't destroy what he built. Nate turned back to her. Your turn. What do you want? Vivienne opened her mouth to give him the prepared answer. The strategic response about market position and technological innovation and all the words that meant nothing and everything. Instead, she told the truth. I want to prove I'm not my mother, that I'm strong enough to build something that can't be taken away, that trusting someone won't destroy me. She stopped, surprised by her own words. And I want Meridian because it deserves someone who will protect it the way it should have been protected, the way people should be protected. The words hung in the air between them, too honest, too raw. She had given him ammunition without meaning to, and she waited for him to use it. But he just nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. Yeah, he said quietly, I get that. Before either of them could say anything else, Sophie appeared at the terrace door. Her eyes found them with the unerring accuracy of someone who had been looking. Ms. Drake, Mr. Carver, my father would like to speak with you both, if you have a moment. They exchanged a glance. Vivienne stood first, smoothing her dress, reaching for the mask that had slipped, but it did not fit quite as well as it had before. Ellis's private study was smaller than the main gallery, lined with books and paintings and photographs of a life well lived. He sat by the window, framed by the darkness outside, looking smaller than he should in the expensive chair. Sit, he said without preamble. Both of you, I don't have time for the standing at attention dance. They sat. Sophie took up position behind her father's chair, watchful and protective. Ellis looked from Vivienne to Nate and back again, his sharp eyes missing nothing. You two put on quite a show tonight. $75,000 for a painting worth $15 at best. That was either the most generous charitable donation of the evening or the most expensive pissing contest. I'm curious which. Both, Vivienne said, because he had asked for honesty and she was apparently committed to it now. A small smile touched Ellis's lips. Good answer. Now let me ask you something else. Why should I sell Meridian to either of you? Because I'll protect it, Nate said immediately. Because I'll make it unbreakable, Vivienne added. Interesting. Ellis leaned back slightly, his breathing careful. One of you thinks in terms of defense, the other in terms of armor. Neither of you is wrong, but neither of you is completely right either. He paused, considering them. Meridian isn't just technology. It's the idea that AI can be built with empathy, that we can teach machines to understand context, nuance, human complexity. Most people want to use it to maximize efficiency or profit. I need someone who understands that the point is to maximize humanity. With respect, Vivienne said carefully, both of those things matter. You can't maximize humanity if the company goes bankrupt. True, which is why I need someone who can do both. Ellis's eyes settled on her with uncomfortable intensity. Tell me, Ms. Drake, what happened to your mother's business? The question hit like a fist. She had not expected him to know, had not expected him to go for the wound so directly. She trusted the wrong person, Vivienne said, keeping her voice level. He took everything. She lost everything, and I learned from that. What did you learn? That trust is expensive, that vulnerability is dangerous, that you should never give anyone enough power to destroy you. Ellis turned to Nate. And you, Mr. Carver, what did you learn when you lost your family? Nate's jaw tightened. He did not answer immediately, and Vivienne could see him struggling with whether to maintain the professional mask or follow her lead into honesty. I learned that control is an illusion, he said finally, that you can make all the right choices and still lose everything, that sometimes the only thing you can do is keep moving forward even when you don't know where you're going. Good, Ellis said. You're both broken. That's good. Whole people don't understand what matters. He coughed a wet sound that made Sophie's hand tighten on his shoulder. When he spoke again, his voice was weaker. I'm going to propose something unusual. You'll both hate it, but I think it's the only way to know which of you should inherit Meridian. What do you propose? Vivienne asked, though dread was already curling in her stomach. I own a house here on the island. Big old place, too much room for one dying man. I want you both to stay there for 3 weeks, together. No leaving, no separate hotels, no escape clauses. During that time, you'll work on a project I've left unfinished, a technology center for underprivileged kids. Nothing to do with AI or business, just building something good. You want us to live together, Nate said slowly, for 3 weeks while competing for your company. I want to see how you handle collaboration, how you handle being in close quarters with someone who wants the same thing you want, how you handle uncertainty and discomfort and all the things that happen when you can't control the narrative. Ellis's smile was small and sharp. Meridian needs someone who can work with people they don't necessarily like or trust, someone who can see past their own ego to what's actually important. This will show me if either of you can do that. And if we refuse, Vivienne asked, then I sell to someone else. There are plenty of offers. He looked between them. But I don't think you'll refuse, because you both want this too much to walk away over something as simple as discomfort. He was right. Vivienne hated that he was right. The house has separate wings, Sophie added quietly. You'd have privacy when you need it, but you'd have to share common spaces, work together, figure out how to coexist. What happens at the end of the 3 weeks? Nate asked. I make my choice. Or maybe you both do. Ellis's eyes had gone distant, tired. Maybe you'll figure out that competition isn't the only option. Or maybe you'll prove that it is. Either way, I'll know what I need to know. Vivienne looked at Nate. He looked back. In his face, she saw the same calculation she was running, the same resistance warring with the same ambition. When would we start? She asked. Tomorrow. Sophie will give you the address. Bring what you need for 3 weeks. Leave your assistants and lawyers in New York. It's just the two of you and what you can build with your own hands. Nate stood first. All right, I'm in. Vivienne stood as well, though every instinct screamed at her to run, to find another way, to not put herself in a position where she would have to trust or be vulnerable or any of the things that had destroyed her mother. But she thought of the painting, her mother's lighthouse, the way she had fought for it tonight without thinking, without strategy, just feeling. Maybe that was what Ellis wanted to see, whether they could stop thinking long enough to just feel. I'm in too, she said. Ellis's smile was satisfied, like he had expected nothing less. Good, Sophie will handle the details. I'll see you both in 3 weeks. Try not to kill each other before then. They left together, walking through the now quiet gallery toward the parking lot. The party had wound down, most guests already departed. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floors. This is insane, Nate said. Completely, Vivienne agreed. We're really going to do this. Apparently. They reached the door. Outside, the valet was bringing cars around. A black sedan for him, a silver coupe for her. Professional, separate, safe. Nate turned to her one more time. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about the painting. I didn't know. I know. And tomorrow when we start this experiment or test or whatever it is, I'm not going to pretend we're friends. I want Meridian. I'm going to fight for it. Good, Vivienne said. So will I. They stood there for a moment, two people about to collide in ways neither of them fully understood. Then Nate smiled just a little, and there was something almost like respect in it. May the best person win. They will, Vivienne promised. She drove back to her hotel alone, the darkness of the island roads pressing in around her. In the back seat, carefully wrapped and secured, her mother's painting rested. She had won that battle. But the war was just beginning. And for the first time in 15 years, she was not entirely sure she wanted to win it alone. The house was a contradiction like everything else about this situation. From the road, it looked like a traditional New England estate, weathered shingles, white trim roses climbing up a trellis that had seen better decades. But when Sophie unlocked the front door and led them inside, Vivienne found herself in something closer to a modern architectural dream. Glass walls opened the back of the house entirely to the ocean. Clean lines and natural wood created spaces that felt both intimate and infinite. My father bought this place 10 years ago, Sophie said, setting their bags in the entrance hall. After his first round of treatment, he said if he was going to fight death, he wanted to do it somewhere beautiful. Nate stood at the windows looking out at the Atlantic. Morning light poured through, turning everything gold. It's extraordinary. He thought so too. Sophie pulled out 2 sets of keys from her pocket. East wing is yours, Mr. Carver. West wing is yours, Miss Drake. You have a bedroom, office, and bathroom. The kitchen, living room, and workspace are shared. My father's project files are in the dining room, blueprints, budgets, contacts, everything you need to finish the technology center. She handed them the keys, her dark eyes moving from Vivienne to Nate with the assessing quality of someone who saw more than people wanted to show. A few rules, Sophie continued. No leaving the property for the 3 weeks except for project-related work. No assistance. No outside help beyond the contractors and suppliers already arranged. You cook, you clean, you figure it out together. My father will check in periodically, but mostly you're on your own. What happens if we fail? Vivienne asked. If the project isn't finished, or if we can't work together, then he has his answer. Sophie's expression softened slightly. Look, I know this seems strange. My father is dying and he's spending his last good months playing matchmaker for his company. But he believes that how people handle difficulty tells you everything about their character. He wants to see you both when you can't hide behind lawyers and strategy and corporate masks. And you, Nate asked, what do you think? Sophie smiled, sad and knowing. I think he's usually right, and I think you both need this more than you know. She left them there, standing in the golden light, 2 strangers about to become something else. The sound of her car fading briefly in the drive felt like a door closing, or maybe opening. Vivienne could not quite tell. Well, Nate said after a moment, I suppose we should look at these project files. They spent the first day in careful professional distance. The technology center was a good project, a building to provide computer access, coding, classes, and mentorship for kids from low-income families. Ellis had secured the land, drawn up plans, even started fundraising. But the construction was stalled. The timeline stretched the details, drowning in the kind of bureaucratic quicksand that killed good intentions. Vivienne took the budget. Nate took the contractor negotiations. They worked in opposite corners of the dining room, speaking only when necessary, treating each other with the polite hostility of people who had not yet decided whether to kill each other. By evening, they had made exactly 0 progress. The contractor wants another $50,000 for materials, Nate said, rubbing his temples. But the budget says we're already over by 30. So we find another contractor. We can't. Ellis already negotiated with everyone within 100 miles. This is the only one willing to work on the timeline. Then we extend the timeline. Ellis wants it finished by Thanksgiving. That's 8 weeks from now. Vivienne looked up from the spreadsheet that had stopped making sense 2 hours ago. This is impossible. Yes, Nate agreed. I'm starting to think that's the point. They ordered pizza because neither of them wanted to cook. Ate in silence while the sun set beyond the windows, turning the ocean the color of wine. The house felt too large and too small, at the same time full of space they did not know how to fill. I'm going to my wing, Vivienne said, finally standing. We'll try again tomorrow. Vivienne, he stopped her with just her name. When she turned it, he was looking at her with something that might have been understanding. We're going to have to actually talk to each other eventually. Might as well start now. What do you want to talk about? I don't know anything that isn't this project. He gestured at the papers spread across the table like casualties. Tell me something real. Something that isn't strategy. She should refuse, should maintain the distance. But the day had been long and frustrating and lonely in a way she had not expected. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Any of this, living with someone, trusting someone, building something together instead of alone. Neither do I, Nate said quietly. But I guess that's what Ellis wants us to figure out. The second day was worse. They argued over paint colors, over the best layout for the computer lab, over whether to prioritize new equipment or better internet infrastructure. Every decision became a battle, not because they actually disagreed, but because neither of them knew how to stop fighting. By afternoon, Vivienne needed air. She walked down the beach away from the house, letting the wind pull at her hair and the rhythm of the waves slow her racing thoughts. She had not felt this out of control in years. Everything about this situation scraped against her careful defenses. She found herself at the property line where a small cottage sat tucked into the dunes. Smoke rose from the chimney despite the mild temperature. As she watched, an elderly woman emerged, white hair tied back, wearing a gardening apron over a dress that had seen decades of use. "Lost deer," the woman called out, her voice carrying surprising strength. "No, just walking." You have the look of someone running, not walking, but I suppose that's your business." The woman pulled off her gardening gloves. "I'm Clara Hawthorne. I've lived here longer than that big house has existed. You must be one of Ellis's experiments." Vivienne moved closer, curious despite herself. Experiments. That's what I call them. His tests. He did the same thing with Sophie, you know. Made her prove she was serious about becoming his daughter before he'd agree to the adoption. Mrs. Hawthorne smiled. "He's a difficult man, but a good one. Come in, have some tea. I can tell you need it." The cottage was small but perfect, filled with books and artwork and the kind of comfortable clutter that came from a life fully lived. Mrs. Hawthorne moved through it with easy familiarity, putting a kettle on, pulling out cups that did not match but somehow belonged together. "So," she said, settling into a chair by the window, "what's troubling you, the project or the man?" "Both. Neither. I don't know." Vivienne accepted the tea, grateful for something to hold. "I'm not good at this." "At what?" "Collaboration, vulnerability, all the things this situation requires." Mrs. Hawthorne studied her with sharp, kind eyes. "You remind me of someone I used to know. Margaret. She had the same look, like she was holding the world together through sheer will alone." Vivienne's hands tightened on the cup. "You knew my mother." "Ah, so you're hers," I wondered. The old woman's face softened. "Yes, I knew Margaret. She was my student briefly many years ago. Exceptionally talented, exceptionally afraid. Afraid of what? Of being ordinary, of being hurt, of taking up space in the world." Mrs. Hawthorne sipped her tea. She fell in love with a man who promised her everything. Partnership, success, a shared dream. Instead, he took everything and left her with nothing but debt and shame. She never recovered. Not really. The words hurt in the way truth always did. "I know." "Do you? Because from where I sit, you're making the same mistake she did." "I'm nothing like." "Oh, you're exactly like her. You think if you're strong enough, controlled enough, if you never trust anyone or need anyone, you'll be safe. But that's not safety, dear. That is just a slower kind of dying." Vivienne set down her tea, hands shaking. "You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I did the same thing after my husband left. Spent 20 years in this cottage alone convincing myself I was independent when really I was just terrified. Mrs. Hawthorne leaned forward. Here's what I learned too late to tell Margaret: the armor you build to keep pain out also keeps love out. And eventually you forget there's a difference. The words sat heavy in the quiet cottage. Outside, the ocean continued its eternal conversation with the shore. Inside, Vivienne felt something crack in her carefully constructed walls. I don't know how to be different, she whispered. Start small. Let someone see you afraid. Let someone help you. Let someone matter. Mrs. Hawthorne smiled. That man in the big house, the one you're fighting with, he's carrying his own armor. Maybe if you both set them down, you'd find something worth keeping. Vivienne walked back slowly, Mrs. Hawthorne's words circling in her mind. When she entered the house, she found Nate in the kitchen, attempting something that might generously be called cooking. Onions burned in a pan, pasta water boiled over. He looked up when she entered, frustration and helplessness clear on his face. I'm failing at dinner, he said. I thought I could make something, be useful, but I don't actually know how to cook anything that isn't ordered from a restaurant or heated from a container. Something about his honesty, his willingness to admit incompetence made her smile. Move over, I'll help. They cooked together, or rather, she cooked while he followed instructions and only occasionally set things on fire. It was domestic and strange, and nothing like her normal life. But there was something peaceful in it. The simple rhythm of chopping vegetables, stirring sauce, working side by side towards something as uncomplicated as a meal. My wife used to cook, Nate said quietly, watching her work. Nothing fancy, but everything tasted like home. After she died, I forgot what that felt like. Food just became fuel. Vivienne added garlic to the pan, let the smell fill the kitchen. My mother taught me, Sunday dinners always. She said no matter how bad the week was, you could fix it with good food and people you loved. Was she right? I don't know. I stopped making Sunday dinners after she died. They ate at the small kitchen table instead of the formal dining room. The pasta was better than it should have been, probably because they were both starving, but maybe because it meant something to have made it together. I met your neighbor today, Vivienne said. Mrs. Hawthorne. Nate looked up interested. What's she like? Perceptive, kind. She knew my mother. Vivienne paused, considering how much to share. She said I'm making the same mistakes, building walls instead of bridges. Are you trying? Probably. He smiled, tired and true. Definitely. I've spent 5 years trying to outrun grief by staying busy, building companies, making deals, never stopping long enough to feel anything. Ella's forcing me to be here to slow down. It's terrifying. Because you might have to feel things. Because I might have to admit that all the success doesn't matter if you're alone. He met her eyes across the table. What scares you? Vivienne thought about deflecting, about giving him something safe and surface, but Mrs. Hawthorne's words still echoed, and she was tired of armor. Trusting someone enough to need them, she said, and having them destroy me the way my mother was destroyed. I wouldn't do that. Everyone says that, until they do. Fair enough. Nate pushed his empty plate aside. So we're both terrified and broken and trapped in a house by a dying man who thinks we need fixing. This is either the worst idea ever or the most brilliant. I can't tell which. Both, Vivienne said. Definitely both. The work went better after that. Not easy, but possible. They found a rhythm, divided tasks based on actual strengths instead of ego. Vivienne handled the budget and timeline, finding savings in places Ellis had missed. Nate negotiated with contractors and suppliers, his easy charm smoothing over the complications that had stalled progress. Days blurred together, early mornings working in comfortable silence. Afternoons on site visits, arguing over details, but hearing each other out. Evenings cooking together, eating together, talking about things that had nothing to do with business. Vivienne visited Mrs. Hawthorne, often drawn by the older woman's easy wisdom. They talked about art and loss and the ways people survive the unsurvivable. Mrs. Hawthorne shared stories about Margaret Drake that Vivienne had never heard: her mother's laughter, her kindness, her secret dreams of opening a gallery. She wanted that more than anything, Mrs. Hawthorne said one afternoon, but her partner convinced her they needed to focus on his business first. Then there was never time for hers. She should have left him. Probably, but love makes us stupid sometimes. Makes us believe in potential instead of reality. The old woman looked at Vivienne carefully. Don't make the same mistake. If you find someone worth loving, make sure they see you as a partner, not a project or a prize. Vivienne thought about Nate, about the way he listened when she talked, really listened, instead of waiting for his turn to speak. About how he made space for her opinions even when he disagreed. About the careful respect in how he moved through shared spaces, never presuming they're always asking. This was not love, it was barely friendship. But it was something, and that something felt dangerous in ways she could not quite name. The storm came on their 12th day. The kind of autumn tempest that turned the Atlantic into fury and the sky the color of bruises. Rain hit the windows like fists. Wind screamed around the corners of the house. The power went out just after dinner. They found candles in the kitchen flashlights in the hall closet. The house creaked and settled around them, suddenly feeling smaller in the dark. Vivienne built a fire in the living room while Nate found blankets. They sat on the floor in front of the flames because the couch felt too formal, too much like they were trying. I used to love storms, Nate said after a while. When I was a kid, my dad would make hot chocolate and we'd sit on the porch watching the lightning over the lake. It felt safe, exciting, like the world was showing off just for us. When did it stop feeling safe? When the plane went down in one. When I learned that storms could kill the people you love. His voice was steady but hollow. I was in a meeting when I got the call. 73 minutes into a presentation about quarterly projections. That's what I was doing when my daughter died, talking about numbers. Vivienne did not reach for him, did not offer platitudes, just sat in the firelight bearing witness to his pain. Her name was Lily, Nate continued and his voice cracked on it. She was 7. She loved dinosaurs and terrible jokes and trying to teach me how to braid hair. I was awful at it. She'd laugh at me every time, but she kept asking me to try. He stopped, breathed. I'd give anything to braid her hair badly one more time. The rain pounded harder. The fire crackled and shifted. My mother died in her sleep, Vivienne said quietly, but she'd been dying for years before that. Slowly, piece by piece. I watched her disappear, and I couldn't stop it, couldn't fix it. I was 26 and I thought I knew everything and I couldn't save my own mother. It wasn't your job to save her. It felt like it was, like if I just worked harder, made more money, proved that she didn't fail, maybe she'd come back. But she never did. Nate turned to look at her, then firelight catching in his eyes. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both trying to fix the past by controlling the future? Is that what we were doing? I think so. I think Ellis knows it too. That's why he put us here, to make us stop running long enough to actually look at what we're running from. The fire popped. A log settled. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the world. I'm tired of running, Vivienne admitted, but I don't know how to stop. Neither do I, but maybe we could figure it out together. It was not a promise, not even quite an offer, just a possibility hanging in the dark between them. Vivienne felt herself leaning toward him, towards something that felt terrifying and necessary. Then her phone buzzed harsh and intrusive. She grabbed it, saw Marcus's name. Her assistant, who was supposed to be in New York, who was not supposed to contact her unless it was an emergency. I'm sorry, she said to Nate. I need to take this. She walked to the window, put the phone to her ear. Marcus, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong exactly. His voice was tight the way it got when he was delivering bad news. But you asked me to dig into Carver Capital's history. Find anything that might give you an edge. Her stomach dropped. She had asked him that. Before the house, before the cooking and talking and firelight conversations. When Nate was still just competition. Marcus, don't. I found something. 15 years ago, Carver Capital had an opportunity to invest in a startup, Cortland Designs. It was you, Vivienne. You before you changed your name. You were drowning trying to save your mother's business after your partner embezzled everything. You needed $200,000 to stay afloat. Carver Capital turned you down. The room tilted. She gripped the windowsill, watching rain streak down the glass. Why? Her voice came out hoarse. Because your partner Daniel Chen gave them a bad reference. Said you were unstable, a bad investment, that you'd already destroyed the company through poor choices. It was all lies, but they believed him. Carver signed off on the decision personally. Nate knew it was me. I don't think so. The application was in your old name, but he's the one who decided not to invest. If he had, your mother might have. Don't. She closed her eyes. Don't finish that sentence. Vivienne, I'm sorry. I thought you should know before you get in any deeper with him. She ended the call, stood there in the dark trying to process what she had just learned. 15 years ago, when she was 26 and desperate, and watching her mother fade, Nate had held her life in his hands, and he had let it fall. It was not his fault. Not really. He had not known her. Daniel's lies were convincing. There was no reason for him to take the risk, but he had still said no, and that no had been the final nail. The last door closing, the moment when she realized she was truly alone. Vivienne, Nate's voice concerned. What's wrong? She turned slowly. He was standing now backlit by the fire looking at her with something that might have been care, and she wanted to scream at him, wanted to demand why he had not taken a chance on her all those years ago, wanted to blame him for every hard thing that came after. But she knew that was not fair, knew that he was not responsible for her pain any more than she was responsible for his. I need to ask you something, she said carefully, and I need you to be honest. All right. 15 years ago. Cortland Designs. Do you remember them? She watched confusion cross his face, followed by concentration as he searched his memory. Then something shifted, recognition maybe, though not the kind she had feared. Vaguely, it was a design firm, right? Boutique marketing or branding or something. We passed on it. He paused. Why, that was my company. My mother's company, actually, but I was running it. We needed capital desperately. You said no. The color drained from his face. Vivienne, I didn't know. I didn't make the connection. Your name was different, and it was 15 years ago, I know. She wrapped her arms around herself. Daniel Chen gave you a reference. He told you I was unstable and incompetent. All lies. But you believed him. He was your business partner. We always check with partners. If he was saying those things, Nate stopped, horror dawning. He was the one who embezzled from you. Wasn't he a man? Yes. And I believed him over you. I helped him destroy you. You didn't know, Vivienne said, but the words felt hollow. You had no way of knowing. That doesn't make it better. He moved toward her, hands raised like he wanted to reach for her, but did not dare. Vivienne, I'm so sorry. If I had known, if I had done even basic due diligence beyond just believing a reference, my mother might have survived, she finished. Or maybe not. Maybe it was too late by then anyway. I'll never know. The storm screamed outside, the fire crackled. Between them, the space felt vast and impossible. I understand if you hate me, Nate said quietly. I understand if you can't forgive this. If I were you, I don't know that I could. And that was the terrible thing. She wanted to hate him, wanted to use this as the reason to rebuild her walls, to prove that trust was poison, to confirm everything she had believed about staying safe through staying alone. But looking at his face, at the genuine anguish there, at the way he held himself, like he expected her to strike, she could not find the hatred, could not even find the anger she knew she should feel. All she found was exhaustion. I don't hate you, she said. I think that's what scares me most. I should hate you. This should be the proof I needed that I can't trust anyone, but all I feel is tired. Tired of what? Of carrying it, all of it, the anger, the fear, the armor. 15 years of never letting anyone close because of what one man did. And now finding out you were part of it, even accidentally, it should be the final straw. But instead, it just feels like more weight I don't want to carry anymore. Nate stood very still, like he was afraid to move. What do you want, Vivienne? Not what you think you should want. What do you actually want? She looked at him, at this man who had accidentally been part of her breaking, who was broken himself, who cooked badly and talked about his daughter with a grief so raw it made her ache, who made her feel less alone, even though she had spent 15 years perfecting her solitude. I want to stop being afraid, she said. I want to trust that someone can know the worst of me and not use it as a weapon. I want... She stopped. The truth lodged in her throat, too dangerous to speak. But Nate heard it anyway. You want to let me in? Yes, and that terrifies me. He moved then, closing the distance between them slowly enough that she could stop him if she wanted. But she did not stop him. Let him come close enough that she could see the firelight reflected in his eyes, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. It terrifies me too, he said. The idea of caring about someone again, of needing them, of having something to lose. His hand came up, hovering near her face but not touching. But I think I'm more terrified of walking away and spending another 5 years alone. What if we break each other? What if we don't? The possibility hung between them, fragile as the firelight. Vivienne felt herself trembling on the edge of something. A choice. A leap. A door she could walk through or bolt shut forever. She thought about her mother, about Mrs. Hawthorne's words, about all the years she had spent being strung by being alone. And she thought that maybe, just maybe, there was another kind of strength. She leaned forward, let her forehead rest against his shoulder, felt his arms come around her, careful and warm and steady. They stood like that for a longest time while the storm raged and the fire burned low. Not kissing, not promising, just holding each other in the dark. Two broken people learning that sometimes the armor was heavier than the risk. Outside, the rain began to soften, the worst of the storm moving on. Inside, something new was beginning, and neither of them was running anymore. The morning after the storm, the world looked scrubbed clean. Sunlight poured through the windows like an apology, and the ocean had returned to its gentle rhythm. Vivienne woke in her own bed, but something fundamental had shifted in the night. The weight she had carried for 15 years felt lighter. Not gone, she knew healing did not work that way, but bearable. She found Nate already in the kitchen attempting coffee. The scene was so domestic it made her heart catch. He looked up when she entered, and the uncertainty in his face mirrored her own. "I made breakfast," he said. "Or what might generously be called breakfast. I'm still not good at this." "You made an effort. That counts." They ate together, the conversation careful but genuine. Neither mentioned the embrace from the night before. Neither mentioned the revelation about Cortland Designs. They simply existed in the space they had created, two people learning to be gentle with each other. "The technology center inspection is today," Nate said, checking his phone. "The contractor thinks we're actually on schedule. That's a minor miracle. We make a good team." The words came easier than she expected. "We do." He met her eyes. "Better than either of us expected." The inspection went well. Better than well. The contractor was impressed by their organization, their clear vision, the way they had streamlined Ellis's original plans without losing the heart of them. Standing in the half-finished building, surrounded by the bones of something good, Vivienne felt a pride that had nothing to do with corporate victories. "You two have done excellent work," the contractor said. "Mr. Tran will be pleased, though I have to say when he first told me about this arrangement, I thought you'd kill each other." "We considered it," Nate said lightly, "but decided building something was more interesting than destroying each other." Vivienne smiled. "Barely more interesting." It was close. They drove back to the house in Nate's car, the afternoon stretching golden around them. The 3 weeks were nearly over. 5 more days and Ellis would make his decision. 5 more days and they would return to their separate lives, separate cities, the careful distance of professional rivals. The thought made something twist in Vivienne's chest. "What happens after?" she asked suddenly. "After Ellis chooses, after we leave here?" Nate's hands tightened on the wheel. "I don't know. I keep trying not to think about it. Because one of us loses Meridian. Because one of us loses this." He gestured at the space between them. "Whatever this is." Vivienne looked out the window at the ocean blurring past. "Maybe it doesn't have to be one or the other. Maybe we could—" Her phone rang. Sophie's name on the screen. Vivienne answered, already knowing from the timing that something had changed. "Vivienne, I need you and Nate to come to the hospital. Now." Sophie's voice was steady but tight. "My father's had a complication. He's asking for you both." The hospital was sterile and bright, the opposite of Ellis's beautiful house. They found him in a private room smaller than he had been 3 weeks ago, the cancer having stolen more than time. But his eyes were still sharp when they entered. "Sit," he said, waving away their concerns. "I'm not dead yet, though I'm closer than I'd like. Sophie, give us the room." Sophie hesitated, then nodded and slipped out. The door closed with a soft click. Ellis studied them both, and Vivienne had the uncomfortable feeling of being seen too clearly. You look different, both of you. Less armored. You put us through a crucible, Nate said. It tends to burn away the unnecessary parts. Good, that was the idea. Ellis shifted carefully in the bed. I'm going to tell you something now, and you're both going to be angry. But I'm dying, so you'll forgive me eventually. Vivienne felt dread curl in her stomach. What did you do? Meridian Tech is bankrupt. Has been for 6 months. He said it calmly like he was discussing the weather. The technology is brilliant, revolutionary even. But I made poor financial decisions. Expanded too fast, trusted the wrong people. The company is worth nothing except the intellectual property, and even that is tied up in enough legal complications to choke a lawyer. The words hit like a physical blow. Vivienne heard Nate inhale sharply beside her. You lied to us, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. You made us compete for something worthless. Made us. She stopped, fury and hurt warring in her throat. I didn't lie. I said I was selling the company. I never said it was profitable. Ellis's expression softened. I needed to know if you could work together. If you could build something good without the promise of reward. Because that's what it's going to take to save Meridian. You can't save bankruptcy, Nate said. Not without massive capital infusion. More than either of us can provide alone. Exactly. Ellis leaned back against his pillows. But together with your resources, combined with your complementary skills, with the trust you've built, you could save it. Make it what it was supposed to be. Not just profitable, but purposeful. Vivienne stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the hospital parking lot stretched, gray and ordinary. Her careful world was collapsing again. You manipulated us, she said to the glass. Used our ambition, our need to prove ourselves. Made us live together, work together, trust each other, all based on a lie. I gave you an opportunity to become something better than you were, Ellis corrected. And you took it, not because I forced you, but because some part of you wanted it. She turned back, ready to argue, and found him looking at her with something that might have been paternal affection. Vivienne Drake, you have spent 15 years being afraid of needing anyone. And Nathaniel Carver, you've spent 5 years being afraid of losing anyone. I didn't cure you of those fears, but I gave you a space to see that maybe the fear was worse than the risk. That doesn't give you the right, Nate started. I'm dying. I don't have time for rights or wrongs. I have time to try and fix one last thing before I go. Ellis's voice went softer. Meridian was my attempt to prove that technology could serve humanity instead of replacing it, that we could build systems with empathy, with understanding, with heart. But I failed. I let my ego get in the way, made bad choices, lost sight of what mattered. He paused, breathing carefully. You two are my last chance. Not to save the company, that might be impossible, but to save the idea, to prove that maybe the point isn't individual victory. Maybe the point is what we can build together. The silence stretched. Vivienne felt her anger warring with understanding her hurt, fighting against the terrible truth of what he was saying. What are you asking? She said finally. I'm asking if you'll try. Both of you. Combine your resources, your companies, your futures. Take on Meridian's debt and mess together. Build something new from the wreckage. He looked from her to Nate and back. I'm asking if you trust each other enough to risk everything. Vivienne met Nate's eyes across the room, saw her own uncertainty reflected there. This was bigger than a technology company. This was Ellis asking them to merge their lives, their work, their carefully constructed independence. This was exactly what she had spent 15 years avoiding. I need to think, she said. Of course, you have until the end of the week. Then I'll dissolve Meridian and scatter the assets. Better to let it die clean than let it become something ugly. Ellis smiled, tired and sad. But I hope you'll choose differently. I think you could be extraordinary together. They left the hospital in silence, drove back to the house without speaking. The sunset was spectacular, all gold and pink and purple, the kind of beauty that felt cruel given the turmoil in Vivienne's chest. Inside, Nate poured them both whiskey. They sat in the living room where they had embraced during the storm, but the warmth from that night felt distant now. He's asking for everything, Vivienne said finally. Not just money, everything. I know. If we do this, if we actually combine our companies take on Meridian's debt, there's no safety net. If it fails, we both lose everything. I know that too. Nate swirled his whiskey, watching the liquid catch the light. But if we don't try, we definitely lose. At least this way, there's a chance. A chance at what? Saving a bankrupt company, proving something to a dying man. A chance at building something that matters more than winning. He looked at her. You said you were tired of running, so am I. But I'm more tired of building empires that don't mean anything. Meridian could mean something, with the right people leading it. And you think we're the right people? I think we might be. Together. He set down his glass. Look, I understand if you can't do this. If the risk is too great. I understand if you need to protect yourself. But I'm going to try. With or without you, I'm going to try to save it. The declaration hung in the air. Vivienne felt something crack inside her, the final piece of armor she had been clutching. You're an idiot, she said. Probably. The smart play is to walk away, cut our losses, go back to what we know. Yes. And you're going to do it anyway. Yes. His smile was crooked, self-aware. Because my daughter used to say that the best things were usually the scary things. And I spent 5 years not being scared because I wasn't alive enough to feel it. But I feel it now. I'm terrified. And that means I'm alive again. Vivienne closed her eyes, thought about her mother, about Mrs. Hawthorne, about all the choices that had led her to this moment sitting in a stranger's house, being asked to trust someone with everything she had built. I need to make a call, she said. She went to her wing, sat on the bed and dialed Marcus. Tell me the truth, she said when he answered. Not what you think I want to hear. The truth. Can we afford to absorb Meridian's debt? No. His answer was immediate. Not without liquidating significant assets. It would leave Drake Industries vulnerable for at least 2 years. If anything went wrong, another market crash, a bad quarter, anything, we'd be in serious trouble. What if Carver Capital came in as partners, full merger, shared resources? Silence on the other end. Then, that would change the equation. His liquidity combined with your assets could work. But Vivienne, you'd be giving up sole control. Everything you've built, you'd have to share. I know. You'd be trusting him completely. I know that too. Another pause. You've changed. 3 weeks ago, you would never have considered this. 3 weeks ago, I was a different person. She looked at her reflection in the dark window. What would you do, Marcus, if you were me? I'd ask myself what I want more, safety or meaning, because you can't have both, not this time. She ended the call, sat in the quiet of her room while the night deepened outside. Somewhere in the house, she could hear Nate moving around, making dinner probably, or trying to. The domesticity of it struck her again. When had this become home? When had he become someone she listened for? She found him in the kitchen, as expected. He had managed pasta and jarred sauce, nothing fancy but edible. He looked up when she entered, hope and resignation mixed on his face. I talked to my assistant, she said, about the numbers. And it's a terrible idea. We'd be exposed financially for years. One wrong move and we'd lose everything. So you're out, what? I didn't say that. She moved closer, taking the spoon from his hand. I said it was a terrible idea, but I've spent 15 years making smart choices, safe choices, being careful and controlled and alone, and none of it made me happy. She stirred the sauce, let the warmth of the stove chase away the evening chill. You make me happy, she said quietly. This house, this work, this strange life we've built, in 3 weeks it makes me happy. Not safe, not smart, but happy. And I think I'd rather have that. Nate was very still. What are you saying? I'm saying yes. To Meridian, to the merger, to all of it. She turned to face him. I'm saying I trust you, and that terrifies me more than bankruptcy. He moved then, crossing the small kitchen in 2 steps. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle and sure. I won't let you down, he said. I can't promise we'll succeed, can't promise it won't be hard. But I won't betray you, I won't leave you, I won't become another person who makes you regret trusting. You better not, because I will destroy you if you do. He laughed, the sound breaking the tension. Fair enough. Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and it felt like falling and flying at once. Nothing was safe, nothing was certain. But for the first time in 15 years, Vivienne felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They pulled apart slowly, still close enough to share breath. "We should tell Ellis," Nate said. "In the morning. Tonight I just want, oh, ah." She stopped, not sure how to finish. "This," he offered. "Us? Yes, this, us." They ate dinner together, talked about the merger, about logistics and timelines, and all the practical matters that would need addressing. But underneath the business talk was something else, something that felt like building a life instead of just a company. After dinner, they sat on the terrace with Warner watching stars emerge. The air had turned crisp, carrying the first real promise of autumn. "I have to tell you something," Nate said eventually. "Something I probably should have led with, but I was afraid it would make everything worse." Vivienne tensed. "What?" "Daniel Chen, your former partner, the one who destroyed your company." Nate stared into his wine glass. 3 years ago, he approached Carver Capital looking for funding. He owed significant debts to some dangerous people. I could have helped him. Instead, I bought his debts from those people, and then I forgave them. She turned to stare at him. "You what?" "I didn't know it was connected to you at the time. I knew his name from that old investment rejection, and something about it bothered me. So I had someone dig deeper. Found out what he'd done to his previous partners. Found out he was a con artist who destroyed several businesses the same way." Nate finally looked at her. "I couldn't undo what he did to you, but I could make sure he never benefited from it. So I cleared his debts, which removed his motivation to keep running cons. Last I heard, he's working construction in Montana and trying to stay sober." Vivienne did not know what to feel. Anger that Nate had kept this from her. Relief that Daniel was no longer a threat. Something complicated and warm that Nate had tried to protect her before he even knew her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to think I was trying to buy forgiveness. Or that I was some kind of savior. I saw a wrong I'd accidentally been part of, and I tried to fix it." He shook his head. "Maybe that was arrogant too. Maybe I should have told you immediately. But I wanted you to choose us because you wanted to. Not because you felt you owed me something." She reached over, laced her fingers through his. "You're an idiot." "I know. But you're my idiot now, so I suppose I have to keep you." They sat like that as the night deepened, hands linked, two people who had finally stopped running from their pasts and started building toward a future. The next morning, they drove to the hospital together. Found Ellis looking worse than yesterday, the toll of the complication showing. But his eyes lit up when they walked in. "Well," he said without preamble, "are you going to let an old man die in peace or make him wait?" "We're in," Vivienne said. "Full merger. We'll take on Meridian's debt restructure. Everything build it right this time." "Together," Nate added, and his hand found hers. Ellis's smile was radiant despite his frailty. "I knew it. Sophie said I was crazy, that I was pushing too hard. But I knew you two could be something extraordinary together." "Don't congratulate yourself too much," Vivienne said. "We're still angry about the manipulation." "Be angry, but be angry while building something beautiful." Ellis reached for papers on his bedside table, his movements slow. "I had Sophie draw these up, just in case. Meridian goes to both of you, 50-50 ownership. But there's a condition." "Of course there is," Nate said wryly. "You have to co-manage it. No bought-out partners, no one in charge. You make every major decision together. If you can't agree, the company dissolves and the assets go to charity." Ellis's expression turned serious. "I'm not just giving you a company. I'm giving you a reason to keep choosing each other. Every day. Even when it's hard." Vivienne looked at Nate, saw her own wonder reflected back. "That's either brilliant or insane," she said. "Both," Ellis confirmed. "Most good things are." They signed the papers there in the hospital room, Sophie as witness. It felt surreal committing to something so enormous in such a quiet space. But maybe that was appropriate. The biggest changes always happened in small moments. When they were done, Ellis leaned back, exhausted but satisfied. "Good, now get out of here. You have work to do, and I need to nap before I die." "You're not dying today," Sophie said firmly from her corner. "Not today," Ellis agreed, "but soon. So don't waste time. Build the thing, make it matter." They left him there, small in his hospital bed, but somehow larger than life. In the parking lot, Vivienne stopped suddenly overwhelmed by everything they had committed to. "We just agreed to merge our companies," she said, "to take on millions in debt, to tie our futures together completely. What if we fail? Then we fail together." Nate pulled her close, his arms solid around her, and pick up the pieces together and try again together. That's what partnership means. "I'm not good at partnership." "Neither am I." We'll learn." The next week was chaos. Lawyers and accountants and 1,000 details that needed addressing. The formal merger of Drake Industries and Carver Capital took shape, creating something new. They decided on a name together, Meridian Partners. Not Drake Carver or some ego-driven combination, but something that honored what they were trying to build. The Technology Center finished on schedule. They held a small opening ceremony with Ellis watching via video call from the hospital. His joy at seeing it complete was worth every difficult moment. Mrs. Hawthorne attended, bringing flowers from her garden. She found Vivienne afterward, pulled her aside. "Your mother would be proud," the old woman said. "Not of what you built, but of who you've become. I'm not sure who that is yet. Someone brave enough to trust, someone strong enough to be vulnerable, someone who learned from her mother's pain but didn't let it define her forever." Mrs. Hawthorne patted her hand. "That's no small thing, dear." Ellis died 3 weeks later in his sleep with Sophie beside him. The funeral was small but beautiful, held at the house overlooking the ocean. People spoke about his vision, his kindness, his impossible standards. Nate gave a eulogy that made even Vivienne cry. "He taught me that winning isn't the only thing worth doing," Nate said, his voice thick with emotion. "That sometimes the greatest victory is learning to share, to trust, to build something with someone instead of against them. I came to Martha's Vineyard thinking I was competing for a company. I left with a partner, a purpose, and a second chance at living." That's his legacy. Sophie scattered his ashes in the ocean at sunset, the same ocean that had framed his last months. Vivienne stood with Nate, their hands linked, watching the light paint everything gold. "He got what he wanted," she said quietly. "He brought us together. He did more than that. He showed us we could be better than we were." Nate pulled her closer. "Think he's satisfied? Probably already planning his next manipulation from whatever afterlife exists." They laughed, tears and joy, mixing the way they always did at funerals for good people. The months after were brutal. Meridian's debt was worse than they had imagined, the legal complications a labyrinth. There were times Vivienne had wanted to quit, wanted to walk away and return to the safety of what she knew. But every time she considered it, she would look at Nate across their shared office. They had set up headquarters in a renovated warehouse in Brooklyn, and remember why they were doing this. Not for profit, not for ego, but for the idea that technology could serve humanity, that broken people could build beautiful things, that partnership was possible even after betrayal. Slowly, impossibly, they started to turn it around. The AI they refined and rebuilt became the standard for empathetic machine learning. Companies that wanted technology with ethics came to them. Grant funding opened up. The losses turned to modest gains, then real growth. But the best part was not the success. It was the partnership. Learning to make decisions together, to disagree and still respect each other, to share not just business, but life. 1 year after that first charity auction, they returned to Martha's Vineyard. The same venue, the same cause, the same crowd of old money and new ambition. But everything else was different. Vivienne wore a dress the color of ocean at dawn. Nate wore a suit that made him look like he belonged in an old film. They arrived together, walked in together, hands linked in a way that no longer felt strange. The painting from last year, her mother's lighthouse, hung in their shared apartment now. They had bought it together. A reminder of where they started, what they had fought for, what they had found. Last year, Nate said, accepting champagne from a passing waiter, "I stood here trying to figure out how to beat you. Last year, I stood here convinced you were my enemy. And now you're my partner, my co-CEO, my person." She smiled. "Though you still can't cook worth a damn." Some things don't change. The auction started. This year, they did not bid against each other. They bid together on a painting of two figures walking on a beach at sunset. It was sentimental and obvious and exactly what they wanted. They won it for twice what it was worth. Later on the terrace where they had first talked honestly, they stood looking out at the same ocean that had witnessed their beginning. "Do you think Ellis knew," Vivienne asked, "that we'd end up here?" "I think he hoped. That's all we can ever do. Hope that the people we care about find what they need." Nate turned her to face him. "I need to ask you something." "That sounds ominous." "It's not, or maybe it is. I don't know anymore." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box. "Vivienne Drake, you are the most terrifying, brilliant, impossible person I've ever met. You make me want to be brave. You make me want to build things that matter. You make me want tomorrow in a way I thought I'd never want anything again." He opened the box. Inside, a simple ring, elegant and understated. "Will you marry me? Will you keep being my partner in business and life and whatever other adventures we stumble into?" Vivienne felt tears burning in her eyes. A year ago, she would have run, would have found 1,000 reasons why this was dangerous, why she could not trust, why love was a weapon. Now she just said yes. They kissed on the terrace while the party continued inside. Two people who had learned that armor was heavy and trust was worth the risk and partnership was the only victory that actually mattered. The ocean whispered its eternal rhythm below them. Above, stars emerged one by one, and in the space between sea and sky, two broken people discovered they could make each other whole. 2 years later, the Meridian Foundation launched on a Tuesday in spring. Not Meridian tech that still existed, profitable and purposeful, but this was different. This was Ellis's dream fully realized, a foundation to help startups with social missions, to provide not just funding, but mentorship, guidance, partnership, to prove that business could be a force for good when led by people who cared about more than quarterly returns. Vivienne and Nate stood at the podium together announcing the first round of recipients. Young founders with big dreams and bigger hearts. People who needed what Ellis had given them, a chance, a challenge, a reason to be better. "My mother once told me that Sunday dinners could fix anything," Vivienne said into the microphone. "I didn't understand then, but I do now. It's not about the food, it's about making space for people to gather, to connect, to remember what matters." She looked at Nate, at Sophie in the front row, at Mrs. Hawthorne, who had traveled from the Vineyard to be here. "Meridian Foundation is our Sunday dinner, a space for people to gather around ideas bigger than themselves, to connect with others who believe that building together is better than winning alone, to remember that the point isn't just success, the point is meaning." The applause was warm, genuine. After they fielded questions, shook hands, posed for photos. The whole time Vivienne felt Nate beside her, not behind, not in front. Beside me, partners in every sense of the word. That evening they returned to their apartment, the one with her mother's lighthouse and his daughter's drawings, and all the accumulated proof that they had built a life together. Vivienne poured wine while Nate attempted dinner. The smoke alarm went off twice. They laughed and ordered takeout instead. "I got a letter today," Nate said over Thai food, "from Daniel Chen." Vivienne set down her chopsticks. "And he's 3 years sober, working construction in Montana like I heard. Says he's trying to make amends to everyone he hurt. Wanted to apologize to me for the false reference he gave about Cortland Designs 15 years ago." Nate paused. "Wanted me to pass along an apology to you too, if I happen to know how to reach you." "What did you tell him?" "That I deliver the message, that I hope he's found peace, that forgiveness is complicated but possible." He met her eyes. Was that all right? Vivienne thought about it, about the rage she had carried for so long, about her mother and loss and all the ways pain could poison if you let it. "It was perfect," she said. "Tell him I forgive him, not because he earned it, but because I don't want to carry it anymore." They finished dinner in comfortable silence. Later, curled up on the couch with a movie neither was really watching, Vivienne felt something settle in her chest, a peace she had never quite believed possible. "I'm happy," she said, surprised by the truth of it. "Yeah." Nate pulled her closer. "Me too." Ellis would be smug about that. Unbearably smug. They laughed, thinking of the difficult, brilliant man who had seen what they could be before they saw it themselves, who had given them a house, a project, in 3 weeks to discover that competition was not the only option. Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy. Inside, two people who had been broken found that their jagged edges fit together perfectly, and in the corner, a lighthouse painting glowed softly in the lamplight, a reminder that sometimes the way home is through someone else's courage to believe in you.